Story 1. Female authors tend to describe the color of a man's hair more frequently than male authors, especially when it is graying. Story 2. He was handsome, like a magazine model but not as delicate. He chopped wood and worked on cars in his free time despite having two jobs: barista and bookshop owner. He smelled of petrichor, cedar, coffee, and the faintest hint of sulfur. His eyes were two crystalline pools of ocean water, deep and mysterious, holding an air of wisdom no one could fathom. His hair, black as a raven's feather, was in disarray but effortlessly perfect. He stared at me, a formless blob, as if I held the sun in the palms of my hands. He gave me a knowing smirk, and then I exploded. As globs of my form rained upon the people, he laughed, a sultry baritone laugh that made me weak and dissolve into nothing. Damien Wolfblood was his name, and I am completely, utterly, inexplicably in love with him. Story 3 ways I would romantically describe my 50-year-old husband's eyes. His eyes are a somber blue, like a winter morning, with flecks of metallic gray that remind me of his Steel Town origins. In the summer, their blueness becomes deeper and richer, like a topaz. How he describes his eyes. I think they are blue. I'm not sure. Do they still appear blue? Do they change with age? Wait, are they blue? Story 4. He is utterly fascinated by a single woman and finds her irresistibly interesting even when she's not really doing much other than breathing or being actively obnoxious. He is attuned to her every emotion and desire. His wardrobe deserves meticulous description. His job does not warrant such detail. He and his friends have long conversations about their feelings and the feelings of their girlfriends. Story 5. Incredibly wealthy individuals who rarely fulfill their responsibilities are a clear indication of something amiss. He is a billionaire who occasionally takes calls while driving. Story 6. Something I've noticed on both sides is characters spending a lot of time thinking about and noticing their own bodies, particularly the sexual parts such as breasts and genitals, which realistically you don't notice about yourself as you go about your day. Like a woman emerging from the bath, feeling the water dripping from her nipples and beating on her skin, or a man who leapt from the bed and strode to the window, his manhood swinging freely beneath a thicket of coarse hair. People aren't really aware of their nipples or their genitals unless they're in use or uncomfortable. I don't walk to the fridge to eat some shredded cheese and think about how my body moves as I do so. I just go. Story 7. The male character is always rich, and he derives his wealth from some business or hobby that he mysteriously has time to pursue while also being a socialite. Despite never going to the gym or doing any hard work, he possesses an impressive physique. He is always handsome yet has a feminine quality at the same time. He is undeniably brooding, as rich and handsome characters often are. They struggle to reconcile their wealth with their incredible good looks and charisma. They constantly think about sex and how to attract women, a behavior that seems acceptable for brooding and attractive billionaires. Despite being a complete playboy, the broody male will show intense devotion to the female main character, sometimes to an extreme degree, except for a scripted event intended to tear them apart. This event is usually trivial compared to challenges faced in typical relationships, leading to a reconciliation at the end where they emerge stronger than before. Women writing male characters often emphasize wealth, physical attractiveness, and reputation to an exaggerated degree. Story 8. I have no idea. Years ago, I was reading The Cuckoo's Calling by Robert Galbraith. I was aware that J.K. Rowling had written mysteries under a pseudonym but didn't realize this was her work. I was about 30 pages in when I stopped reading, thinking there's no way this was written by a man. It was explained in small print on the back page. I tried to analyze my thoughts, but to this day, I have no idea how I knew. Story 9. Men often fixate on one woman and will do anything to pursue her, rather than cutting their losses and moving on. Additionally, gay men can present characteristics of either gender. If they are perceived as a woman, they may be a more feminine partner, while if they are seen as a man, they may be more muscular. The sex scenes often resemble those found in adult films rather than accurately depicting how same-sex relationships function. Story 10. There are essentially no normal men. The male characters fall into three distinct groups. 1. Impossibly handsome, wealthy, successful, and kind-hearted. He could have any woman he wanted but is in love with the protagonist. 2. A weak, insecure man, struggling with life and clearly in need of nurturing from the protagonist. 3. An obnoxious, sexist man who seems to have stepped out of a poorly made sexual harassment training video. Story 11. Just tell her how you feel. Men don't talk like that to other men, but I hear that in romantic movies all the time, especially when I watch with my wonderful wife. Story 12. I have read fan fiction written by women who seem to believe that the anus self-lubricates and that no preparation is necessary. Story 13. I read a few books by Nora Roberts a long time ago. They were part of the same series. The main characters were women, while the boyfriends were poorly developed characters. It's been a long time since I read them, so it's challenging to think of specific examples, but they felt like shallow, two-dimensional accessories to the main characters, behaving in ways that no real person would. Story 14. Certain topics make it more obvious than others. However, I think when men apologize in books, it becomes clear which gender is writing it. It is even more evident when you hear the thoughts of the men while it happens. Story 15. The ideal male partner is a supportive figure who lacks personality, desires, or motivations of his own. The negative male partner embodies every negative stereotype found in characters like Homer Simpson, Peter Griffin, and the typical sitcom father. The undesirable men are often misogynistic, narcissistic, and immature individuals, and in some cases even date rapists. The love interest is tall, wealthy, creative, and sensitive, possessing physical attributes that are most desirable for the given context. For example, in a rural setting, he looks great in jeans and a flannel shirt, has a weathered face, has built his own house and furniture, grows his own food, and cares for his animals as if they were the children he has always wanted but never found the right partner for, until he met the protagonist. Story 16. If they are a father, they are often completely inept, essentially an airhead who might put the diaper on a pineapple and leave the baby at the store. Story 17. He's brooding and somewhat unpleasant, but he notices the protagonist because she's different from others. She doesn't wear makeup and she enjoys reading. Everyone else thinks she's plain, but they can't see what he sees. He is rude and aggressive towards her initially, often frustrated by her clumsiness. However, he can't stay away from her. Story 18. When their personality is expressed like a handbag, completely devoid of anything that doesn't look appealing on her arm. Story 19. Male protagonists written by women are often less decisive, more introspective, and generally more feelings-oriented than those written by men. In real life, men tend to be more problem and action-oriented than the way women authors portray them. Story 20. When a character embodies basic, typically masculine traits with no exceptions, or where the only exceptions are portrayed as character flaws, it can create a shallow understanding of men. If most male characters seem to exist solely to be protective or are merely workaholics, while female characters enjoy character depth, even if it's just basic hobbies, that presents a one-dimensional perspective. This perspective is often based on cliches seen predominantly in portrayals by women, akin to the male version of a doll character without depth. Moreover, if a character's appearance is described in excessive detail that feels unnecessary for the narrative, it may indicate an idle insert character, which suggests the author favors this character over others. This is particularly apparent in genres where physical appearance does not significantly contribute to a character's role, especially if other male characters are neglected in this regard. Story 21. Many examples here are relevant to the romance genre. Are there any that are more prevalent in fantasy or science fiction, or even anything not involving romance? Story 22. This might get buried, but as a gay man reading gay romance novels, the majority are written by women. I have a list. One character is a virgin or is latently bisexual but never acts on it. We can have sex and still know how to have relationships. No matter how long their relationships last, they are always using condoms. No one is getting pregnant. The descriptions of desire are often inaccurate. We don't hate how much we want it. The men have little grasp of their emotions. He loved me, so I ran away is not a realistic reaction, especially when dealing with two men. When it comes to gay sex, don't write about it unless you have a clear understanding of the subject. The lack of characterization suggests that the authors have never spent time around men who love men. Story 23. If a male character has a large, impressive organ, it is likely that the book was written by a woman or that the character is a rare animal smuggler. Story 24. Has anyone seen that episode of Ted Lasso where Hannah Waddingham is held captive in a barge by a man? It's acceptable because he's in his late 40s, tall, mysterious, handsome, and Dutch. Or that romantic comedy where the main character moves into a house and Jude Law shows up. Story 25. I am only basing this on the two recent books I have read by female authors, but I found it challenging to relate to the way a man's emotions or thought processes were described in tactical or fighting situations, whether it involved hunting or protecting a group. Story 26. All male characters are portrayed negatively, except for a few close to the main character, typically the love interest or a close friend. Story 27. I thought I was reading a novel by a male author until a scene with two adult brothers fighting caught my attention. The scene was very descriptive and unusually long. I expected that if a man wrote this, one brother would have simply punched the other in the arm. Instead, the brothers were wrestling and laughing, and I noticed one brother might have messed up the other brother's hair for no clear reason. Male authors often depict women approaching men, while female authors tend to do the opposite. Story 28. When the author uses the phrase, "after all, wasn't he entitled to whatever foolish thing the guy does next?" Story 29. A tall 250 centimeters man who is lean with a bit of muscle, has a twink face, and a mysterious demeanor spends the entire book ignoring the girl, yet ultimately saves the day because he actually loves her. He has dark hair, blue eyes, and a bland personality with a hint of femininity. He is also wealthy and makes love for hours, days, and even years. If I have to read another book like that, I will be extremely frustrated. Story 30. I specifically thought of this while reading Water for Elephants. It's been a while, but the character had the thought process of a modern feminist's idea of a man, despite being written in 2006. Story 31. It is somewhat unusual that most examples I have encountered of women writing male characters are found in romance novels. While it is a significant genre, women also write extensively beyond romance. The Curse of Chalayan is certainly not a romance, and the male main character is deeply flawed. A better example, or perhaps a different one, is that I do not see Kazaril as being significantly different from a protagonist that David Eddings might create, except that he is much less annoying. Story 32. Female authors often create characters that express female emotions. While there is a spectrum of emotional experiences, I can usually identify a female author when reading. This often happens when a male character behaves in an emotionally motivated way rather than logically, or when internal emotional states are described in a way that feels inauthentic for a male character. The Farser series by Robin Hobb exemplifies this tendency. It frequently comes up in discussions on various forums, and whenever someone praises a particularly well-written male character, the comment typically comes from a female user, followed by male users arguing that men do not typically think like that. These books are among my favorites, but partway through, I looked up whether Robin Hobb was a female author because I could sense it. Story 33. Longing for a female protagonist, especially when he is one of several men vying for her attention, does not seem to bother him despite her inability to choose between him and other suitors. He rationalizes her shortcomings aloud, and she does have shortcomings because she is written as a complex human being. I do not believe this occurs in all works by women, but it is quite common. Story 34. I have noticed a trend in character development across both genders, but particularly in female authors. They often create characters with a dark secret that is concealed either through outright lies or memory issues. An egregious example I encountered was a book featuring a revenant as the protagonist. Early on, in the first chapter, she informs the reader that she does not know who killed her and is uncertain how to return to her normal life. Throughout the book, she seeks to solve this mystery, only to reveal at the end that she had a good idea of who killed her all along. She states, "I didn't know exactly who killed me, but I knew who strangled me into unconsciousness before I woke up dead, buried in a backyard. I also knew all along that if I killed him, I would die. A girl's gotta have some secrets. This resolution felt like the cheapest way to wrap up a mystery plot, and too often, I see similar patterns in protagonists created by female authors. This trend is particularly prevalent in young adult novels. Story 35. The man struggles to find solutions without consulting a woman. He is constantly seeking the woman's attention, with little mention of his activities when he is not with her. There are excessive details about the man's facial features, particularly concerning his eyes, which are the most noticeable aspect. Information about his clothing is also included. This observation may be controversial, but in some books I have read, if the main character is male, he often has strained family relationships or his parents are deceased. Story 36. We all know examples of tropes that make it clear that a male author is writing a female character. I don't have any examples, except that they often describe physical attributes in strange detail. Story 37. Women do not understand male motivation very well. The belief that men think only about sex and romance is a comedic stereotype often perpetuated by female authors. Women also develop peculiar ideas about the male body, such as the notion that men can ejaculate from their anus. While stimulation in that area may lead to certain experiences, the idea of ejaculation originating from the anus is incorrect. Additionally, the concept of a first erection is misleading. Boys may have erections from the time of penile development, and such occurrences are not solely linked to sexual arousal. Furthermore, there is a misunderstanding regarding height and physical strength, with women often perceiving men as being much stronger than they typically are. Story 38. The biggest example that comes to mind is from She-Hulk. There are many small moments, but this one stands out because it is minor yet significant. After She-Hulk and Daredevil spend the night together, Daredevil has the walk of shame back home. He walks home in full superhero gear since he didn't bring a change of clothes, with his shoes in hand while the neighbors stare. But pause for a second. Why is he walking barefoot? He has his shoes right there, so why isn't he wearing them? It's because women often walk barefoot. They go out dressed to impress, usually in high heels. After a random hookup, if they need to walk home the next day, they take off their uncomfortable heels and go barefoot. But that's not typical for men. Daredevil has combat boots, which are designed to be comfortable during physical activity. So Daredevil walked home barefoot after a night with She-Hulk because the writers overlook this aspect of men's experiences. Story 39. When the male character spends more time discussing his emotions and relationships than engaging in productive activities. Story 40. A female author would never write a male character sitting around thinking about nothing, but men really do that in real life, and women don't seem to believe that's possible. Story 41. Male characters who are primarily heterosexual but have experimented with another man at some point in their past are often written by female authors, in my experience. Story 42. The Harry Potter series features two emotionally stunted characters who are frequently saved by their friend Hermione. Story 43. The ultimate clue is a physically attractive man whose appearance does not reveal muscle and who lacks mental sharpness, yet is a genuinely good person. Additionally, a male character may be excessively assertive toward other male characters over trivial matters. A female character intervenes between two males who seem ready to fight, saying, "Boys, just put it back in your pants." Story 44. Not a 100% rule, but if the name of the author has initials rather than a first name, then it is likely a female author. Story 45. It is amusing in romance novels when they present the male love interest's point of view, and the only thought he has is how much he desires the protagonist. Men in romance novels are not fully developed characters. They are representations of masculinity. Story 46. I don't read romance fiction, and while I'm sure all those cliches everyone else mentions are well represented, in the literary fiction I mostly read, women write men quite convincingly. I don't have any specific notes. When I reflect on my past year of reading, there have been far fewer instances of women writing men inadequately than men writing women inadequately. Story 47. I don't know what specifically caused it, but reading Demon Copperhead made me very aware of the fact that this is how women perceive men's thoughts. Story 48. They are eagerly trying to please. In fact, they seem to have no life other than providing for a woman's wants. They are like the dummies you see in a department store, all surface, nothing inside. Story 49. The book Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow was very poorly written by a woman. I don't read romance novels, so it seems the trope in this book is the opposite of what many here have experienced. The male protagonist is a nerdy, sensitive, disabled intellectual, and the female protagonist is a self-insert. What struck me in the beginning was when the female character gets dumped by her professor and becomes depressed. The male character has a conversation with his emotionally mature roommate about what he should do. The advice given was something like, hobble your way to her apartment every day, give her continuous attention even when she says not to, and if that doesn't work, further intervene in her personal life by telling her parents to get her a therapist, and then check her into a hospital because she's sad about being dumped. I was a little biased since the book was about game development, and as a programmer, it made no sense. The professor was written as a brilliant, unconventional teacher who cusses and talks about sex, but that doesn't work in a technical setting. At one point, a student asks which programming language to use to make a game. This is during the 1990s when it was primarily C, C++, or assembly. The professor responds to use whatever gets your creativity flowing, and that when he gets stagnant, he will just switch languages in the middle of coding. Now, also, the implication that the creative idea is the hardest part of game development and programming ignores the technical details. This was a time when developers were building their own engines to optimize hardware performance. Okay, rant over. I think I read 60 pages before dropping it. Story 50. I nearly made a mistake when I originally had a male character mentally describing another male character he doesn't even like as objectively handsome. Eventually, I thought about that and realized that's not the terminology he would use. Story 51. Frankenstein is a beautifully written book in which all the male characters speak, as if they have only ever encountered thoughtful poetry. It is amusing how quickly the monster adapts to language and human social cues. Story 52. Red, White, and Royal Blue contains several instances of unreciprocated dialogue between gay male characters. Only a straight woman could come up with that. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.